Then you fear the Brian Herbert fans.
Of course I do. His writing invites criticism.
Then what could you do?
Run faster. History is a constant race between Frank Herbert's writing and catastrophe, aka having to talk about Brian Herbert books. Podcasts help, but it's never enough. You also must run and leave us a 5-star rating.
You are sharing your soul with me, love. Do you know that?
Pretty sure I do, yeah.
Love, is Brian's writing canon?
No, well, kite lower than the Dune Encyclopedia for reasons we've got into. Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name is Leo.
And my name's Abu.
Oh, and today on the show, we are climbing this book like, I don't know, someone climbs rocks.
That's right. Dare I say, we're about to reach our peak.
We're about to have our orgasms. We are talking about God Emperor of Dune. This is the episode I was excited to record like 2.5 years ago when we started whatever we were doing 2.5 years ago. So excited.
So excited.
Oh, but before we talk about rock climbing, let's take care of our housekeeping. Let's make Shout Out Mapes proud. And first up, that means spoiler warning. Spoiler warning! This episode has no spoilers beyond the pages and books we've already talked about. So, if you're caught up on our book club, you are safe to listen and enjoy.
And, of course, a huge shout out to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons. Folks, bear with us because we've got a long list of patrons at this level that we need to shout out. Starting with Case Aiken, followed by Daniel Dion, Roman Caballo, Jonathan Lambert, and C.R. Spruill. My goodness. That level of support is overwhelming. We are grateful, and it helps make the show possible. So a huge shout out to you folks who support at that level, but also a big thank you to all of our patrons and all of our listeners who genuinely help make this show possible week to week. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and we couldn't do this without all of you.
You know, Abu, this might be taking it a little bit over the line, but I wonder if they renew for the next month, if I'll have my orgasm.
Oh, you know?
It does feel like walking on eggshells. It's a little too explicit.
It is a bit explicit. But dare I say, I can make that happen.
Oh, wow.
Next month.
Looking forward to it. Let's talk about today's episode. And y'all know the game plan. As always, we're going to begin today with a summary of today's chapters, a real tear-jerker in today's reading, and then we're going to dive into a couple of takeaways, and then we'll wrap up with some yummy, freshly cooked, hot, still in the oven, spice morsels.
That's right. Well, before we get into the penultimate episode of this God Emperor of Dune book club series, let's take a short breather. But don't go anywhere, dear listener, when we come back. We're getting into the reading.
Welcome back, everybody. Oh my gosh, buckle up. We're going on a peregrination. We are going on a peregrination.
That's right.
In our first chapter today, we join Leto and company as they set off toward Tuono village, and of course, the best man at the wedding, Moneo, who's having to plan and organize everything, is stressed and upset. Right. He is last second trying to be like, but this venue is fine, Lord. Isn't this venue, the Citadel, beautiful? And Leto's not having it.
Right.
Leto waves away all of Moneo's security concerns. It's fine. We're good. And even then, when the Major Domo attempts to kind of Hail Mary, can we please just have the wedding here? the God Emperor answers by closing the bubble of his royal cart. Brutal.
Wow.
Brutal.
A literal door slam in Moneo's face.
I also love Hwi going, why is Moneo being so difficult?
Right.
It's like, come on, Hwi, gentle, sweet Hwi Nari, be a little bit more compassionate. Moneo's life sucks right now.
Yeah. Poor guy's stressed.
It's a reasonable amount of being difficult.
It is.
Now, as an aside, you did some math, right? Because they talked about the distance to Tuono Village, and I think Leto uses the term of brisk walk / trot.
Right. Right.
And I was like, are these people jogging? What's happening?
Yeah. That was my question as well. And I really wanted to get to the bottom of this. And luckily, we were provided with some numbers. So I did some quick math. Tuono Village is about 180 kilometers away, we're told. And this peregrination is going to take 3 days. So on the conservative side, I assumed that they're going to be brisk walking / jogging for about 8 hours a day, with maybe a lunch break in there. So if you do the math on that, that means that everyone in this peregrination has to be maintaining a speed of 7.5 kilometers an hour. And I took that a step further. I was like, okay, I don't even really know what that means.
Right.
Because I live in the States and we don't use kilometers here. So I did a couple of quick conversions, and I'll admit I rounded some numbers just to get some nice and even numbers here. But I've come to the conclusion that this group has to maintain roughly a 13 to 14 minute mile pace to get to Tuono Village in time.
Yeah, that's
And
fast.
to put that in context, that's pretty fast. Like, that's a power walk. Like, you're not just casually strolling here. You are thinking about how fast you're walking, is how fast this is. I would say, like, a casual walk for the average person is probably somewhere in the, like, 18, 17, 18, 19 minute per mile pace.
I mean, maybe. I live in New York. I got long legs. I walk pretty fast. And if I'm walking a mile, I have to give myself like 18 minutes, 19 minutes.
Right.
So I think the average person who doesn't live in New York and, takes time to appreciate life, smell the flowers, feel the breeze on their
isn't
skin.
running away from someone chasing
isn't
them.
fleeing the terrier-sized rat with a knife in its mouth, I will say, I think the 8 hours a day is overly generous. I suspect all of these people, and considering Leto's on a fucking floating cart,
Right.
I suspect they're doing like 12-hour days. I suspect they're doing like 14 hours. Like, this is a marathon. I don't think they're like, let's stop and have coffee for a bit. Like, I think this is like we're focused on doing this.
That's true.
But I appreciate, again, it is a clip, and even from Frank Herbert's words, canonically, they are trotting, which is not a comfortable pace for any amount of time.
Right.
Oh,
Especially
gosh.
for that long of a time too, even if they are walking, trotting for 12 hours, like imagine just doing that for 12 hours straight. Like your
Brutal.
legs, your ankles, your hips would be so sore.
No wonder Leto's like, will there be hot water and icy hot rubbing cream?
Right.
And it was like, yeah, obviously, because everyone's going to be dying.
Right. Moneo has to book like a massage parlor at every stop along the way for 1,000 people. Poor guy.
Poor guy. And then Hwi has the gall to be like, why is he stressed? Oh my God. Well, all of that math aside, let's turn to Leto and Hwi's conversation within the bubble. And Hwi notes that Moneo has been generally irritable and kind of behaving a little bit different since Moneo and Leto's date at Little Citadel. Now, I'm not sure Hwi knows that Leto had Moneo kill Malky with his bare hands like a day or two ago. It seems like from her questioning, she just is not aware that her uncle was murked like 2 days ago.
Yeah. That one just stays with the boys, I think. Only for the boys.
When you ask your best friend to like kill someone with his bare hands for you, eliminate a problem, that's just for the boys, right?
Yeah, of course.
Boy code. Like when we were kids, like you have someone kill someone for you, bare hands. That's what you do. Now, Leto is brushing aside a lot of these concerns. Quote, I share your concern for Moneo, but no explanation of mine will help him now. Moneo is trapped. He has learned that it is difficult to live in the present, pointless to live in the future, and impossible to live in the past. End quote. And
Brutal.
very true. Now, even Hwi is like, didn't you trap him? I kind of feel like you trapped him. Like,
Yeah.
of all of the people who have an effect on his life, I feel like you're number one. But Leto explains he is trapped, he's stuck in the aristocratic mindset of thinking that the past is the key to the future, right? Like that the idea that you have all these memories of the past. He thinks my memories are this great key that unlock the secrets of the future. But as we learned from his discussion with Malky, the past is not the answer to living. The past is not the answer to the future. Quote, most believe that a satisfactory future requires a return to an idealized past, a past which never in fact existed. End quote. And what a
An
fucking
all-time
banger.
Yeah.
Banger of a quote. Oh, so good.
So good. I love it. This quote actually came up, I believe, in a recent mailbag episode when someone asked us what our favorite quotes were from Leto or our favorite insights were from Leto in this book. This easily tops the charts for me. Such a great quote, and I think it's so relevant to the world today, but also probably the world always, all of human history probably has fallen into this trap of believing things were better back in my day, you know?
Yeah, there's this like rose tinted glasses phenomena of just like you look back with that nostalgia to a time that never existed. You
Mm-hmm.
forget all the hardships, you forget all the progress, and you forget that like a lot of the progress that we enjoy today has to be given up to reclaim that one tiny quality of life that you're so pining after.
Yeah.
But also, when we talk about one of the biggest themes in Dune being an escape from stagnation, there is nothing that drags you into stagnation more than trying to return to the safety of some previous strategy,
Yep.
which was already demonstrated to not be sufficient because you fucking moved on from it.
Right.
You evolved past it. So Leto, ultimately with the Golden Path, in a lot of ways, it's like he has identified everything that has ever been done, and he's getting rid of the possibility of any of those things being done again.
Right.
So that the future is the one thing that has never happened, which is a sustaining humanity that can make long-term decisions without that sort of gravitational pull back to yesteryear of
Right.
like, well, I liked when everyone was nice, and you're like, and white and everyone who wasn't white was having the worst fucking time, and they're like, well, we everyone could have a good time now. Bullshit, idiot.
Yeah.
Wrong. False. Let me just do a quick Google. Actually, yeah, it just says no. It just says no.
Yeah.
One result on Google. That's crazy.
Weren't the Middle Ages just so romantic, Leo? Right? You're just on the farm,
Yeah.
maybe a crusade or two, but like
Yeah.
it's kind of a good time, really.
Yeah. Honest work. Honest work.
An honest day's work. You came home to the family.
Yeah.
Maybe you brought home some loot from
Uh-huh.
some unknown country in the East we're not going to worry about. And
Yeah.
yeah, some days I really wish we could just go back to that.
Fun fact also, yeah, go back to that time. Statistically, you're a fucking peasant and you die when you're 30. So good
There's
job.
no penicillin.
There's no penicillin. You're short-sighted. Enjoy a blurry world forever.
Forever.
Yeah. Also, like, yeah, unless you're literally today a billionaire, you're not on a horse. Horses are for the people with money. Fucking idiot.
Totally.
Oh, that's fun.
Such a great quote.
Yeah. So, moving on from probably one of the best quotes in the book, Leto and Hwi's conversation then broaches the topic of the God Emperor's soul. She kind of asks him about his soul, which makes him super uncomfortable, right? Now, he's like, gives off very clear, I don't want to talk about it. Yep. But she's like, am I asking you too much? And he goes, you could never ask me too much. She's like, okay, then I am going to repeat my question. What's up with your soul, dog? And she was told, we're told, by Malky that Leto was the, quote, ultimate artist at probing the soul, end quote. And specifically his own, beginning with his own. And she asks Leto why he spared Malky. Leto's answer is super interesting, given what we know about the Ixian no room's existence.
Right.
Quote, I suggested to Malky that there might be some things men should not invent. My words angered him. He said, "You think that in a world without birds, men would not invent aircraft. What a fool you are. Men can invent anything." End quote.
Uh,
Now, Leto says that Malky's words rang true and reminded him that human history is this race between invention and catastrophe.
right.
And it's funny, too, because Malky, being angered, doesn't even dispute what Leto said. Leto said, some things should not be invented. By the way, he's telling the Ixian that, and the Ixians were like trying to make a hunter-seeker that would kill all biological life. Leto's like, maybe not that one.
Right.
And Malky's like, you son of a bitch! We can do anything!
You don't think we can do it? We're gonna prove you wrong!
We'll fucking do it! And the thing is, like, men can invent anything. And I think Leto acknowledges this is true. He's like, yeah, they can make the worst things that have ever been and will ever be. And also, I think this idea that human history is a race between invention and catastrophe, oh my gosh, this feels so ultimately relevant today. And I'm sure in the 60s and the 70s, it was nuclear war.
Oppenheimer, anyone?
Yeah, Oppenheimer, but even also like they were seeing the birth of computing. And with the amount of like science fiction that already explored dystopian futures by like computers and machine minds and things like that, even some things that might be within Dune's own history, the idea of like, yeah, you're inventing things, but you have to move quickly in order to prevent catastrophe following those inventions.
Yeah, totally. I mean, back in the Middle Ages, not to keep bringing it back to the best ages, but
Trebuchet. Trebuchets.
right, they're out here like trebuchet anyone, printing press anyone, right? Like, what is this guy Gutenberg up to?
All downhill from there.
All downhill. He's corrupting the youth.
I like my books hand copied by a scribe who knows Latin. Now, the chapter ends as Hwi once again pierces Leto's heart and soul. She's really out here being the therapist that we all need.
Oh, yeah.
Because she's just seeing through the bullshit. She's seeing through the facade that even he doesn't seem to be fully aware of, right? And she says she recognizes the thing in him, the one thing that no one else does, basically. Quote, love, that is what you understand. Love, and that is all of it. You have faith in life. I know that the courage of love can reside only in this faith. End quote.
Wow.
Hwi truly is some of Frank's best writing. Like, all of his optimism is condensed within this character because it's such a beautiful idea that you can only be brave enough to love ultimately if you do have faith in the value of life, or like if you hold within yourself the value of life. It's a powerful statement, and it is ultimately humanizing and validating for the God Emperor Leto. Like, if at any point we were wondering about Leto's ultimate qualities, if he was gone beyond humanity and a monster and all this stuff, this is the ultimate declaration in this book. This is perhaps the thesis through which to see everything that he says and does. He is serving and saving humanity because he loves humanity and because he has faith in life. And also in this scene, he's just a boy, just a child in so many ways who loves a girl. And there's such adorable moments in this chapter where he's like, kind of as a mental exercise, puts together all of the best qualities of everything he's ever experienced in his millions of lives, and it becomes something akin to Hwi, but then it is pale in comparison to her living and breathing in front of him. Right. And he's just like, wow, you're really great. She's like, you've been staring at me for a hot minute, friend. You're just
That's
really
the best
swell.
You could come up with. Right.
You're dang. So you're cute. And it's really touching to see this vulnerability from Leto and this inability to kind of, like, he's shaking and trembling, literally. And at one point he even cries a tear that then burns him and burns his skin.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
Love is pain.
And I also, the fact that she wipes the tear from him and he's like by the way, you're the first person since I became this way to touch my face.
Yeah.
And that nearly made me
Yikes.
cry. That's brutal and sad. Not once has Moneo wiped a tear from his cheek. Awful. And then
Awful.
also, he even seems to mention, like, I was surprised the cowl let her, which kind of feels like he has this, like, auto defense system. It blinks
Yeah.
shut to protect his vulnerable pieces. But, like, it didn't happen because of her. Oh my God. His whole, like, the worm and him, the all of him
Love this
accepts
woman.
her and loves her, yes,
Yeah.
and is vulnerable to her. It's beautiful.
It's such a beautiful scene and really
Yeah.
touching, as you're saying. I'll also add that it's very reassuring to me personally to see that even a 3,500-year-old godworm with access to all of human history
Yeah.
has the worst riz possible. He doesn't have an excuse, and yet his riz is subpar at best.
Yeah.
And that makes me feel a bit better, you know.
You know, we've all seen those movies where, like, the leading man is, like, so smart and suave, but then you're in front of that special person and you're like, "But you're just,
Yeah,
you're great.
right.
Oh, I fucked that up." You know, this is Leto, the ultimate example of that. That's a great point. Yeah. So
Yeah.
rest assured, listener, if you've ever fumbled the ball in flirting, charisma-ing
Mm-hmm.
someone, so too has God Emperor Leto himself.
You're not alone. You're in good company.
Thank goodness this tear-jerking chapter doesn't precede one of the silliest and weirdest chapters.
Oh boy. All right, let's talk about chapter 48. Our second chapter
Woo!
today is truly iconic. And I know we say that phrase all the time on this podcast, but it applies here
One of the best chapters in the book for sure. Yeah.
easily. And what's kind of funny is basically nothing happens in this chapter. For the entirety of it, Duncan is just climbing the
Yep.
big cliff wall behind Tuono Village. And all throughout the climb, we get these little flashbacks. And most of these flashbacks basically serve to reveal how Siona and Duncan's plan is beginning to take shape with the unwitting help of Garoon and Nayla. They've kind of roped them into this too. Now, back on the wall, Duncan's mind starts to wander as he's climbing, right? He's trying not to think about how genuinely endlessly tall this wall is, and he's just focusing on the next handhold, the next foothold. And through some of his wandering thoughts, we do get glimpses into his childhood, which we're going to put a pin in for now, and we'll revisit a little bit later in the morsels. But despite the difficulty of this climb and what appears to be the sheer impossibility of it, Duncan's determination I found to be truly admirable. Like he's up here, free climbing this fucking wall,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not allowing himself to be distracted from the goal. Quote, I will defeat you, Leto. I will defeat you for myself, not for Hwi, but for myself. End quote.
Yeah. And to be clear, you're right. He's free soloing. He has pinions, like those little, like, safety hooks that he could hammer into the wall, into the
Yeah,
cliff face,
yeah,
because he lost an argument with Nayla and Siona. He's not using the. He is, if he, like, falls at any moment, he's dead. And
right.
it's just nuts. It's crazy.
It's wild and incredibly impressive and frankly turning me on a little bit. Now,
Oh, yeah. You, me, and all of our listeners, I'm sure.
now notably, there's a really powerful thought in here that Duncan has that shows us that by this point in his life, he has shed his loyalty to Leto
Right.
and has even found a way to come to terms with defying an Atreides, a thing that is so the antithesis of a Duncan that it's literally used to break Golas, right?
Yeah.
Quote, Leto had become something else, no longer Atreides, not even human, and Siona opposed him. The real Atreides turned away from him, as I do. End quote.
So, okay. Here we have Duncan, right?
Yeah.
The most ultimately loyal to House Atreides character that has ever been written. And going back all the way to Dune, and we have
Hmm.
Dr. Hwi betraying a similarly named character, Leto Atreides.
Right.
Again, I maintain this isn't like cemented anywhere, but I think it's super defensible that Dr. Hwi was able to quote unquote break his Suk doctor conditioning
Hmm.
without breaking it. He didn't break his conditioning because his conditioning was to the House of House Atreides. He believed, because he was more or less correct, that Duke Leto Atreides was already on his way to death. Like he was already, there was no hope for him, no way to save him. And
Right.
only by leaning into the trap, giving him a chance to kill Baron Harkonnen, and then also arranging for the escape and survival of Paul and Jessica could he truly serve House Atreides, right? Like that I think is true.
Hmm. Hmm.
And here we're seeing another deeply, unbreakably loyal servant of House Atreides, right? Almost like he's conditioned with the Suk school, whatever. And he's now negotiating what it means to be Atreides. He's
Right.
like, he's not Atreides anymore. That's not what an Atreides would do. That's not what I think they would do. And
Yes.
not only does this then become a pattern, but I think Leto too would probably point out something about the idea of like, what does it mean to be an Atreides as like the lever on which your loyalty lies being a matter of semantics and being a matter of like something that is very manipulatable, something that doesn't have true, real meaning. Like, you can't really define yourself on that loyalty if the loyalty comes down to definitions.
Yeah.
It's all very interesting to see this other approach to how do I bring myself to grapple with my own limitations. I don't know. It seems poignant that this is the second Leto we're seeing betrayed to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, I find the fact that he's picking the true Atreides Siona in his mind, right? He's
Yeah.
not really betraying an Atreides. He's just like
Right. Yeah.
picking the better one, which, to your point, like Leto would argue, like, how are you picking which one's better? You know, like your loyalty seems to be real malleable here all of a sudden.
Yeah. But also, I agree. Like, he needs to serve her because that's the golden path.
Oh, totally,
So it's
totally.
like, yeah, betray me. But isn't it funny the word games
Yeah,
you're playing with yourself?
exactly. Almost like the power of words are both infinite and exactly what we give them.
All that in a word, Lord?
All right, let's round out this chapter because we've omitted a certain detail until this moment. After this long and arduous climb, that is as much mental as physical, I really appreciated the writing throughout this chapter
Yeah,
that
totally.
made it clear how physically difficult it was, but also what a mental game it was for Duncan to reach the top.
Yeah.
He does eventually reach the top of this 900-meter wall,
Yes.
and everyone below is cheering, understandably. And among the onlookers, perhaps no one is more excited than Nayla herself, who has, throughout the climb, slowly been finding a growing attraction to the Gola. And in some of the truly horniest writing in the entire Dune saga up to this point, Nayla has these thoughts about wanting to have Duncan's children.
Yeah.
And she suddenly is like feeling jealous that Siona gets to have Duncan and not her. Like the God
Yeah, yeah,
Emperor
yeah.
has dictated it's only for Siona. She's having all these thoughts. Quote, she could feel her heart hammering, though. Idaho's venture was like sex, she thought. It was not passively erotic, but akin to rare magic in the way it seized her. She had to keep reminding herself that Idaho was not for her.
I want you to narrate the entire book with that intensity.
End quote.
Also, Idaho's venture was like sex. Nayla, what is your sex life like?
My goodness, I need to know.
I'm so curious now. Have you never? It's possible.
Possible.
Or is every time you've had sex a like life and death endeavor that is
Yeah.
like a superhuman feat of physicality? And I'm just so
It's
curious.
either or, you know? It's either no experience or only the most intense life and death experiences.
Or we know she's like really big, so maybe she only dates like short kings, and she's
Mm-hmm.
just like every time we have sex, they're climbing this mountain. They're just climbing this mountain.
They're climbing the mountain of my beautiful temple of a body
Yeah.
that towers
Yes.
over them.
And then she sees him climbing the mountain and she's like, oh, that's like a short king climbing me.
All valid theories. I think you're onto something here. All right, well, let's get to it because this chapter, Leo, literally ends on an explosive note as Duncan reaches the top
Yeah.
and Nayla reaches a peak of her own. Quote, "It was only when she saw the rope come snaking down that Nayla had her orgasm." End quote.
The fucking gall to end your chapter that way. Because, like, no remainder of a page has ever looked so blank as her orgasm and then just the rest of the page. And it's like, I have to sit with this now? That's the rest of the chapter? And now there's a new chapter. Oh my God. Frank.
Incredible. What a chapter. What an author. What a book.
Also, now we can say, imagine the dilemma of being podcasters going, read until the end of this chapter, which ends on the sentence. And then we realize the peril.
This was this
episode. That sentence is the read until the sentence. It was only when she saw the rope sinking down that Nayla had her orgasm. No, we can't do that.
Now you know why we had to be vague
Yeah.
in the last episode when we assigned the reading.
But
that is the reading for today. Those are our chapters and our chapter summaries. Let's take a moment to pause and perhaps cool down our own incoming orgasms. Let's take a breather. Let's take a short break, but don't go anywhere, folks, because we have a couple of deep dive takeaways to get into. And then, of course, later, some spice morsels to chomp down on. We will be back in just a minute.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you took a cold shower.
Yeah.
Hope you thought about the puppies or whatever it is people do. Our first takeaway today is Leto's soul.
Yes.
Now that we're thinking about sex, let's talk about beautiful love and soul stuff. And let's actually talk specifically about this kind of therapy session between Hwi and Leto, because this is really where we see the full shape of kind of Hwi's character and why she is as impactful as she is, not only for Leto, but I think for many of us as readers, where we see her taking her place in the book. And this begins with her inviting Leto to be vulnerable with her in a way that he hasn't been able to be vulnerable with anybody since maybe Ganima, since literally his twin sister, who he had been with since his moment of birth, right into an assassination attempt.
Right.
Quote, "I think that since we cannot share the love of the flesh, we must share the love of the soul. Would you share that with me, Leto?" End quote.
Oh, wow.
And Leto is like, oh, he was literally taken aback, which is an interesting sentence to read about the God Emperor, this like aloof asshole who's always pranking people and talking shit. The fact that he's like, bullshit response, through which Hwi is like, okay, I'm calling you on your bluff. You'll answer my questions, right? And he's like, anything, I'll answer anything you ask. And she's like, all right, same question a second time. And she continues to push him on it, right?
Yeah.
She agrees with her uncle Malky's view, his assessment, that Leto is the ultimate artist at probing the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And Leto continues, of course, to be awkward, and he's kind of trying to dodge. It seems like he's really uncomfortable with this whole line of conversation. He's maybe even being a little defensive and trying to maybe obfuscate things through language and through words. And the conversation does turn toward Malky quickly. But I also wanted to say, I saw in all of this a really, really charming humility in Leto. Like, Leto will be the first to acknowledge his many skills and powers. But I think what she's telling him is something that no one has been able to tell him before. And it's something that is true. And it's something that he knows is true, but feels abashed because, it's like the first time someone's ever complimented you on something that's very niche, but
Yeah.
you feel is true. It's like, wow, oh no, I'm seen. I'm being witnessed. Oh dear. And it's not
Right.
something you've maybe calloused over. Of course, everyone goes, wow, your prescience is so incredible, Lord. And he's heard that for 3,000 years. This is the first time someone's saying, you have beautiful eyes. And he's like, oh my God, I'm flustered, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But she says you have this brilliance about you, this ability to dissect what it is to have a soul and all this. And his response, quote, you need only the plodding perseverance of duration, no brilliance,
Mm.
end quote, is the kind of shit I've been dealing with my whole goddamn life because my dad's an amazing artist. You can look at our podcast art, for
Yeah.
instance. He's incredible. And you say, wow, you're so good at art. And he goes, it's just a lot of practice. I do okay sometimes. And you're like, oh,
Right.
fuck you. Fuck you, man. You're so good. It's that exact thing. It's not just perseverance, it's plodding perseverance, it's mindless perseverance. He's like, listen, you're right. I do investigate myself a lot, but it's just something anybody could do it if you have the time. And I happen to have the time. It's nothing special. But like that does feel really humble and very kind of abashed and caught off guard. It's very sweet. It's a beautiful moment that we kind of catalyzes.
Right. It's exactly as you're saying, this inability to sort of take a compliment and the instinct being to like immediately downplay it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I have beautiful eyes. Oh, you know, genes, genetics. You know how that works.
Didn't choose them. They're in my head. You know, yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, continuing with the conversation, they do have that little aside about Malky that we talked about in the summary. But after they speak of Malky, Hwi tells Leto that he is indeed, in this very moment, sharing his soul with her by opening up, by being vulnerable about his fears, by discussing those things with Malky that he perhaps has discussed with no one. And you called this a therapy session earlier, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Like all throughout this scene, I couldn't help but think of this modern stereotype where we see this idea that women in most heterosexual relationships are the ones to carry the emotional burden or to do the emotional labor of like remembering birthdays and reaching out to friends and sending condolences because so many men are just like not in tune with their feelings.
Yeah.
And all of that responsibility often falls on the woman in the family. And I couldn't help but think of that here, where like Hui is the one that is poking and prodding and getting Leto to open up in a way that he's clearly uncomfortable doing.
Yeah.
And it's clearly affecting him as well, right? Like his hands start to shake at one point in the conversation. And as we stated earlier, he like sheds tears that literally burn him as they run down his face.
And he is Fremen. Like Leto is a
Yep,
Fremen person.
absolutely.
So the idea that he is shedding tears as part of this emotional moment is so profound. This is not this soft-bodied, water fat ass off-worlder Paul Atreides crying because his dad died.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
this is
Oh,
Leto
boo.
2, a Fremen child with every memory of every person crying. It's incredible.
It's incredible. It's a really powerful scene, and it certainly affected me emotionally. And we got to get to this final declaration because the scene sort of wraps
It's
up, and
incredible.
they're like
Yeah.
sort of talking about Leto's soul, and Hui really goes for the jugular here. Quote, I have no inner eye, no inner voices, she said, but I have seen my lord Leto, whose soul I love, and I know the only thing that you truly understand. Love. That is what you understand. Love. And that is all of it. End quote.
Unbelievable.
Oh,
Yeah.
unbelievable scene. And this really makes him drop his defenses. And this is the moment he like fully sort of begins tearing up and trembling. And we chatted about this a bit in the summary, but we have discussed on this podcast before how Leto loves his companions. He loves Moneo. He has loved every Atreides before, even the ones he's had to kill in service of the Golden Path. Those deaths affect him deeply and have for thousands of years because the truth is, he loves humanity. He wouldn't have made 3,500 years of ultimate sacrifices, physical, mental, spiritual, if he didn't love humanity this much.
Right.
And Hui is recognizing that. And of course, the sad, sort of ironic twist of all of this is that he's also kind of an insufferable asshole by this point in his life, and he
Yeah.
will be remembered by most of humanity as the tyrant, the ultimate tyrant who ultimately oppressed us. And it's Hwi who's able to see through that in a way that even people like Moneo and Nayla, who revere and worship this guy, don't really recognize. Because to them, he's just like this all powerful deity, and it's just their purpose to serve him, right? He's God,
Right, right,
and we
right.
are God's servants. And it doesn't go any deeper than that for most of them.
Hashtag yes, Lord.
Hashtag yes, Lord. And on the flip side of that, you have the rebels, right? You have people like Duncan and Siona and Malky, to whom Leto is simply a monstrosity and the ultimate tyrant and the greatest of all evils. But to Hwi, to her, he is that tragic 9-year-old boy who had to make the tough choices that were thrust upon him, choices that he had no say in, choices that were his birthright. And in this moment and in this scene, she is speaking directly to that traumatized inner child in Leto and seeing him and seeing his soul for what it truly is, a being that loves humanity so, so, so much and will go to any length to protect them.
Yeah. Definitely when Leto says, my golden path has already, basically saved humanity.
Yeah.
That is a moment where you can be tempted to say, okay, then anything he does is worth it. Like anything, any action he takes is justified because he has already saved humanity. If not for him, humanity would be gone everywhere permanently already.
Mm-hmm.
So let's trust this guy with whatever he does. But like, that is a very pragmatic approach. This is the humanitarian acknowledgement that he is also doing whatever monstrosity he commits, whatever terrible things he does despite or because of his love, and how then hard that can be if you're having to be firm, right? As
Yeah.
Albus Dumbledore says, wait, what's the quote? It
uh,
takes a great deal of courage to stand up. I just watched that movie recently. Great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. Well,
yeah.
it takes a great deal to put down the enemies of humanity, but it also, Leto is having to clip the wings of humanity at times, and to know that he so fully loves humanity makes that much more tragic and that much more incredible that he's doing it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it
Truly.
is a very, very, very important and impactful chapter, I think.
Yeah. It serves to humanize him in a very important way for our understanding of his character. And also, as we stated earlier, it's also a beautiful scene where Hui, at least in my estimation, becomes one of the best characters in the book, right?
Yeah.
The optimism, the purity, the honesty. This is the scene where I finally recognize why Leto loves this person so much, because she's capable of this. And not to ruin the beautiful conversation we've set up here, but I do just want to say men are literally out here
Yeah.
becoming 3,500-year-old god worms
Yeah.
before going to therapy.
Yeah, and climbing 900-meter walls. What the fuck are we doing? One of them is just making his lifespan so long he can't help but self-reflect. He's like,
Yep.
well, I've got thousands of years. There was nothing else to do. And
Right.
then there's other ones like, fuck it, climbing a wall.
Right. Safety harness? Nope.
Fuck that. That's for
I won't be
people.
able to reflect on my feelings if I'm not actively about to die.
Yeah, reasonable.
And every woman in the crowd is like, there's professionals who can help you process this. You don't need to climb. He's climbing.
He's climbing. He's already on the wall. And again, then there's some subset of people. I'll just say people in general. I bet Garoon was also very turned on. Subsect of people just looking up at that dumb, stupid man who's processing his feelings out on that rock wall going, oh, this is pretty hot.
Absolutely.
And actually,
Totally.
that
Totally.
transitions us beautifully to
Yes.
one of the horniest chapters in
Indeed.
the book. And if not for the subtext, the literal sentences, let's talk about the chapter with the rock climbing and Nayla's eroticism and Nayla's sort of like hammering heart and sweaty palms and desire to birth this man's children can feel like a very unnecessary addition to chapter 48
Yeah.
and can feel very out of place and also can feel very, I don't know, just after that heartfelt soul searching chapter, it's very strange. And
It
so
is.
we wanted to maybe explore a little bit of why. Why this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I came up with my own theories, but I also saw that you did a ton of research. And I think all of this is because Frank makes some weird choices sometimes, but he doesn't write stuff for no reason.
Yes.
A lot of his weird stuff is because of some underlying belief or philosophy that is explored through characters making choices. So here we are, wondering how Nayla's orgasm fits into the larger themes of God Emperor of Dune.
That's right.
And to be clear, unfortunately, you can't turn to the back of the book, and there's no in terminology, the Imperium section saying Nayla's orgasm with an explanation of what exactly Frank meant.
Yeah.
So we're going to share our theories based on our research and our interpretations.
Yeah.
And I'll kick it to you because you filled out this section before I did in the script. And you found some really great conversations about it on
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
interweb. And I think it's a really great place to start. So,
Okay.
what
Yeah.
did you find when you Google image searched Nayla's orgasm?
Well, that is
Orgasm,
dramatically
Dune,
different.
Duncan, orgasm again, just to be safe, climbing.
Yeah, yeah. Weirdly, I just kept ending up on Quinn's YouTube channel over and over again. So I don't know how he conquered the SEO game there, but he did it.
Yeah, it's if you look at the code of his website, it's just every other word is orgasm. All of the blank space is just orgasm written in the background color.
Right? In white text. Okay, so my initial thoughts about Nayla's orgasm, and in particular the first time I read God Emperor of Dune, were to at first find it completely hilarious and out of place and utterly random.
Hmm.
And I suspect I'm not alone in that, right? Many people reading this book for the first time are going to be like, what am I reading? What is
Yeah,
happening?
yeah.
But I did some research and I found some really great discussions online about this scene, trying to decipher why
Hmm.
Frank would include this orgasm and why Nayla in particular is having it.
Yeah,
And so I wanted to share a couple of these theories because I love them and I agree with all of them, and they really help paint this scene in a deeper context than just weird horniness.
yeah. Like, ha ha ha, weird.
So, firstly, we know that Nayla is absolutely loyal to the God Emperor, unquestioningly. And in the chapter, as she witnesses Duncan make this climb, she thinks to herself, quote, "He will succeed or he will not. Whatever happens, it is God's will." End quote. So even this climb is something that her God has ordained. And in my research, I found a really great comment from Reddit user Tospic,
Hmm.
who proposes that watching her commander, because recall Duncan is still the commander of the fish speakers, watching her commander achieve what looks like a miracle, achieve this climb 900 meters up an apparently smooth cliff face, leads to her religious fanaticism to manifest itself in sexual pleasure.
Yeah,
She's so overwhelmed by witnessing this miracle happen in front of her, this godly miracle that must have only happened because God willed it, that it literally manifests in her body as an orgasm. That it's just like the biological response to witnessing what in her mind is proof of God's will. And I love that. Such an excellent theory.
yeah. And that also feels very in line with like an exploration of messiahs and prophets and different
Yeah,
cults and things like that. Yeah, that tracks.
absolutely. I mean, like in cults, we see people brought to physical tears during rallies or during, exorcism. I don't know if you've seen those like real shady videos where like these fake religious people are
Yeah,
like exorcising demons from someone's body.
yeah,
But
yeah,
these people are having like real biological responses, whether or not it's bullshit. They believe it and they're so fanatical about it that they're like weeping and falling to their knees and their bodies are reacting. And so much in that same way, perhaps Nayla's body is physically reacting to what she is witnessing here. Now, another way to interpret Nayla's orgasm is as a representative of Leto's piece. So, another Reddit user in another comment that I found, this user's called Poop Test 123, so take that as you will.
as the great internet scholar, poop test 1, 2, 3 once wrote.
Indeed, the great scholar, Mr. Test once wrote that perhaps Leto's suppression of humanity, right, in almost every aspect, social, physical, psychological, spiritual, Leto has oppressed humanity in every way possible. This, of course, leads to a lot of pent up energy, and Leto himself has explained this. We talked many episodes ago about this like pressure cooker plan that Leto has for humanity to explode out in rebellion against his oppression. Perhaps that is what's happening here with Nayla as well. She is one of the most oppressed people, of course, because she is fully bought into the God Emperor, and witnessing Duncan's climb and her resulting orgasm is perhaps just one small example of an explosive release of that pent up energy. That's an interesting theory, and I can definitely see that as well. Her reaction here sort of being a microcosm of humanity's larger reaction against Leto to finally release all this energy. Similar to that theory, I found another post by Reddit user JBod1, who also observed that Duncan's climb here is in and of itself an act of rebelliousness. It's an act of pure recklessness.
Yeah.
And it's an act of independence against the God Emperor, right? This dude is doing something of his own free will, and his determination and willpower will get him through it. Feelings that Nayla very likely hasn't had since childhood, right? To have your own independent thought, to do something through your own willpower. To her, her strength, her willpower comes through the God Emperor and for the God Emperor.
Right,
and so to
right.
witness such reckless abandonment and such reckless independence is maybe like a hot and taboo thing for Nayla to see. Like we all know that like a lot of sexuality is tied in like taboo, and taboo things are sexualized for a reason. Maybe her seeing this brazen independence is like so overwhelmingly sexy because it's something she's never considered for herself, which is a theory I really like as well. So those are a couple of the better theories that I found online in my research. And I will say I agree with all of them. And I think they all play a part in our understanding of Nayla's somewhat out of the blue and somewhat weird eroticism in this scene. I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, of all these theories.
Yeah.
I also, just as sort of a closing note, I also just want to leave open the possibility that Frank was super horny the day he wrote this chapter and included this. And also, maybe Duncan just has an incredible ass, and when you're looking up at him, all you see is just the most amazing ass in the universe. And look, that's going to get all of us. Garoon fucking rock hard over there.
Didn't know it was a full moon right now. Wow. The third moon of Arrakis.
The third moon of Arrakis.
They call that one the
Duncan
God's
Idaho
hand.
says. Exactly. So, just on a silly note there, of course, there's nuance here, but I also just like to think like Frank was just having a horny day. We all do.
Yeah, it's fun to think about. I'm very in the camp of like this chapter contains a lot more than just the sort of like LOL funny memes. Like Frank Herbert is horny and weird.
Right.
And I think the absurdity of the chapter aside, like legitimately when we got into this book, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to talk about the rock climbing.
Yeah.
But rereading it, it's a fucking good chapter. Like the writing is incredibly visceral. Like I really feel as I'm reading the chapter, like I'm on the rock face with Duncan, right? The sweat on his face, he pushes his cheek against the rock. The moments that the rock breaks away from his hands, he mentions like the skin breaking on his fingers, but as long as the bone and the tendons are there, he can ignore the pain of his flesh.
Yeah.
There are so many little details that are just so visceral and so present. I'm like, this is such good writing. Oh my God. And I think that as a reader, I think this mirrors Duncan's experience of having to not allow himself to think too much about the future, too much about the past. I'm like experiencing the moment with him in a way that I think is very reminiscent of maybe his experience of just like being so present in that moment.
Right.
Like his success on this rock wall is dependent upon him being alive and present in his current circumstance. something that literally Leto was just talking about in the chapter previous, right?
Right.
So the way I was kind of tying it all together in my head was Duncan's success and conversely Nayla's orgasm, because Nayla's like, I wonder if I'll have an orgasm if he succeeds in this crazy feat.
Yeah.
His success and her orgasm are only realized when Duncan is actively embodying Leto's teachings, right? Leto has forever been like, we need a humanity that can be present and make decisions and not be wrapped up in the past and not be too predictive of the future and caught within like that middle ground, right? Leto's quote, right? The difficult to live in the present, pointless to live in the future, and impossible to live in the past. We see Duncan go through those steps on the rock wall, right? He's thinking about Leto and Hwi are going to be here tomorrow, and I can't, oh, fuck, I can't think about that right now. Like, I just cannot be thinking about what happens next. I have to be here. And then he's like thinking about being a kid on Giddy Prime, climbing on those rocks as a youth to escape. I can't be thinking consciously about that stuff. It has to live with me in this moment. That muscle memory has to be here. And the more I think about it, the more in danger I am of dying and failing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the same way that we see Leto constantly precariously balanced on this, like doing everything just right so that the golden path comes into full realization, we are seeing Duncan find his own balance between these two modes of thinking and finding that mode that I think brings him into the living reality of what Leto needs him to be for the golden path. And then Nayla's orgasm, as silly as it is, and as much as it does kind of make Nayla a literary tool that Frank is using to demonstrate something about Duncan, it is the moment that Duncan is fully realized that will propel humanity forward or whatever. And that is the wish of her God Emperor. So it's in alignment with her deep set, trained into her desire to make Leto's wishes come true, right?
Yeah.
All of that aside, I love those theories as well. I love that people
Mm-hmm.
are talking about it. These texts only get more interesting to me the more conversations I hear about them. And also, I just want to take a moment and say, fucking Jason Momoa, Duncan, Idaho, he is
Right.
like a renowned rock climber. So now
No
we can
way.
finally, yeah, I remember searching, I was thinking about merch ideas. I was like searching for like rock climbing pictures, and Jason Momoa is like a renowned, world known rock climber.
Holy shit.
So the fact that Duncan, Idaho's actor is like
Wow.
already set up to be a really great rock climber who looks, by the way, wonderful on a rock wall.
All right, that ass.
Just putting it out there. God's Peach, we call it. It's pretty incredible. He's the perfect Duncan, Idaho. And another fun fact, I was looking up a 900-meter wall. Yeah, great. What does that fucking mean?
Mm-hmm.
In real world numbers, it's a little over 3,000 feet,
Holy shit.
which is about the height of El Capitan. So if you out there in listener land want to have an idea of the wall that Duncan climbed, just Google El Capitan, the mountain, and you will see the size of that royal road, that wall. And you can watch the documentary Free Solo, which was Alex Honnold literally free soloing, doing what Duncan did,
Yep.
but in the real world in 2017, which is pretty wild. Even by rock climbing standards, people were like, that's impossible. And he took 7 years or something to do it. But it's something that a human did. So it's fun to reread this chapter having seen Free Solo and to see all of the decisions that Alex Honnold had to make on the rock wall and seeing a lot of them in this chapter about Duncan. I mean, it seems like Frank did a lot of research about rock climbing. Based on photos of him, I didn't imagine him to be one to throw himself onto a rock wall. But yeah, it's very, 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 very cool.
Yeah.
I think that wraps up our takeaways, right? So that's,
Indeed.
we have our two takeaways. We have Leto's soul. We have Nayla's horniness. Truly the dichotomy of Dune.
Indeed.
We are going to end on our spice morsels just after a quick break. So take a moment, dry your hands, maybe change out your underwear. We're going to be right back after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's round out today's episode with a pair of yummy, delicious, and nutritious morsels. Beginning with morsel number 1, Duncan's childhood. Now, to be absolutely clear, we actually did an entire episode about the early life of Duncan, Idaho. So go check that out if you want the full details. But it is worth reiterating some of what we know about his childhood again briefly today, based on what we learned from his thoughts on the wall. Because in today's reading, we're told that, quote, he had learned survival by flight into the high rocks of his home planet, end quote. That's one little thought we get. Another quote that we get later on the climb is interesting because it tells us about his experience with Harkonnens as a child. Quote, he had only to close his eyes and the pattern lay there, fixed the way he had learned to do it as a child hiding from Harkonnen slave raiders. End quote. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons, because when you look into Duncan's childhood in the Dune Encyclopedia, there's actually very little detail, basically no detail, about any of Duncan's life before he crosses paths with the Atreides. And according to the encyclopedia, the Atreides find Duncan and help him basically get an apprenticeship under housekeeping. They basically give him like a scholarship.
Right.
And all we really know from the encyclopedia is that he was born on Caladan and he was born to lowborn parents, so lowborn that the encyclopedia didn't even mention their fucking names. We don't even know who his parents are. And he really only came onto the historical scene once his exceptional talents became apparent during his training at the Swordmaster School of Keenaz. That's when people started noticing, oh, wait, this Duncan guy, he's a fucking killer. He's great. That's what the encyclopedia tells us. But I want to switch gears because, interestingly, this appears to be a very rare instance where Frank's writing seems to align more with Brian's prequel novels than it does with the encyclopedia. Because when you look at Brian's prequel novels, Duncan is actually born on Giddy Prime.
Yeah.
And Duncan's parents in those novels are these like minor government officials. And as the story goes, they somehow get on the bad side of the Harkonnens, and Duncan's entire family is either enslaved or killed. He's also enslaved, and the Harkonnens use young Duncan basically for sport. It's really gross. They like release him
Yeah.
out into the wilderness and then like hunt him for fun and capture him again.
Right.
And they do this a couple of times until a young, ingenious, resourceful young Duncan Idaho finds a way to kill his captors, to turn on them and kill him during one of the hunts, and then manage to get off the planet, to get off Giddy Prime. And then he finds himself on Caladan, and then that's where he crosses paths with the Atreides. That's how the story goes in Brian's prequels. These quotes right here kind of make it sound like this fits a little more neatly with Brian's prequel history of Duncan Idaho versus the encyclopedia's version of how Duncan Idaho's early young life went. But there you go. Those are both versions of Duncan's early life and a little bit of context based on the quotes we get in today's reading.
Yeah. From what I saw, some of the details about him, like being raised on Giddy Prime, came from like Heretics and Chapter House, which happened after the Dune Encyclopedia was printed anyway.
That's
so
right.
it's very possible that this is something that Frank established himself after the Dune Encyclopedia was printed, and then Brian and Kevin
Absolutely.
were writing with the benefit of knowing that Frank had already established that in Heretics. So
Totally. Yep. There's a bit of a publishing timeline snafu there.
yeah, exactly. And, again, Frank said in his endorsement of the Dune Encyclopedia, he reserved rights to change anything and everything. So,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
good to know. Our second spice morsel today is the Grecian curve, Delphic chant.
Ooh, words. What do they mean?
Oh, Google them. Well, in today's reading, Leto observes Hwi's beautiful face and how her mouth is, quote, set in Grecian curves, designed for a Delphic chant, but she hummed no prophetic syllables, end quote. My God, she's just beautiful. Now, this is the second time in the book the Oracle of Delphi has been mentioned, so it's worth a quick refresher. Now, for starters, the word Grecian is defined as, quote, beautiful and simple in the style of ancient Greece, especially of building styles or a person's appearance, end quote. So statuesque, I imagine, kind of perfect, pristine. So fun to see Leto admiring Hwi's ancient Greek-like beauty, especially considering House Atreides, we know, goes back to the ancient Greeks.
That's right. That's
Very nice. He's using a vocabulary from his grandpappy. There's like 27,000
couple of extra
grands
grands in there,
missing,
yeah.
but it's fine. And then the ancient Greece connection actually continues with this idea of Delphic chants and prophetic syllables, which is, of course, a clear reference to the Oracle of Delphi. Now, the Oracle is based in Apollo's temple at Delphi and was the most famous ancient oracle in Greece, believed to deliver prophecies from the god Apollo himself.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty good. Kind of an early proto-Atreides oracle, huh?
Yeah.
Now, according to Britannica, the oracle herself was, quote, a woman over 50 years old who lived apart from her husband and dressed in a maiden's clothes, end quote.
Okay.
How scandalous.
Yeah, wow.
Interesting
I'm
details,
not
Britannica.
turned on, actually. I'm just...
Okay, yeah. What an interesting series of descriptions.
Right.
Now, this wasn't just one lady. The oracle was a title bestowed upon priestesses of the temple when the previous one died. You can see some maybe proto Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother, or like the Sayadina title of the Fremen, right?
Yeah.
Kind of similar idea. It's a high title that you kind of train into. Although the selection process is a mystery. So we don't know if they had to take of the water of life. We don't know if they had to kill a man with their bare hands, or...
We don't know. I'm sure it had something to do with Apollo talking to you.
Yeah, I totally talked to him and he said you, and everyone goes, whoa, he said you? And you go, yeah, he said me. And they
Totally,
go,
he voted for me.
he voted for me. And everyone goes, she's got the gall. Give her the maiden's clothes and separate her from her husband.
Right. Incredible. Wait, are you 50? We got to double check that you're 50.
Yeah. You must be at least 50 to be the oracle. So what Leto is saying is she looks over 50 and looks like she lives apart from her husband.
That's right.
Are those
That's
maiden's clothes you're wearing? Wow, Hwi, you sure do look like you live apart from your husband.
Indeed, indeed. All right, Leo. I can't believe I'm saying this, but that wraps up the penultimate episode of this book club series.
Yeah.
And the only homework that there's left to assign to our dear readers who've journeyed with us so far,
Yeah,
is to finish the book.
read the whole rest of it. Yeah.
Read the rest of the book
We're
because
done.
we're done. The next episode will be the final episode of the God Emperor of Dune book club series, and we will finally be wrapping up this amazing, amazing book.
Mm-hmm. You know, we're tired of this. We're going to give you just 2 chapters. We're just going to... No, fuck it. Read the rest of the book. Lazy.
That's right.
Also,
That's right.
we've got so many emails from people like, I already did. We're like, okay, well, we have a lot to talk about.
We can only go so fast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, very exciting to get to the end of it. Do you think we'll do like a retrospective episode as well once we talk
No,
about...
I don't think we have time because we're running right up
Oh,
to Dune
gosh.
Part 2's release.
True.
And then we're going to be in full-on movie coverage mode, and there just won't be time to turn back. So,
Well, what an opportunity for people to write us their questions and final reflections in
Yes.
a public mailbag. Because
that's right.
once again, the public mailbags will align with people having gotten through the whole book. That's great. But before we wrap up this penultimate episode,
Yes.
we want to remind you of some ways to support us in the show and keep in touch with us.
Yes.
The 2 best ways, as always, become a patron and check out our merch store, patreon.com/GamJabar. Oh my gosh, the support on Patreon has been unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Really genuinely humbling. Thank you, everybody. It makes what we do possible and allows us to just give more and more of our time and energy to this project. So thank you. And of course, we have our merch store. Again, if you know any better merch stores, let us know. I hate Teespring. But the links are in the show notes, so check those out. And of course, we always love to hear from you. So if you have suggestions for better merch host websites, if you want to ask us questions about the Patreon, or if you just want to say hi and give us feedback on the show, email us, gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com. That's our email address. We're always happy to take your messages. And of course, if you've got pets, send us pictures. We love pictures of
Yes.
pets. They're so cute. They're the best.
Yes, indeed. Please reach out to us. We love to hear from you.
It's a little disappointing, though. So we just got through that chapter where they're in the bubble together.
Right.
Frank left out the detail that Leto is actually stretched out on a 7-meter long leather couch the whole time, which is kind of like, it's a crazy detail to leave out.
That's right. Hui's like pushing her glasses up and has her notepad out.
Yeah, she has her notepad out and she's writing at like uncomfortable times. Like he's like, haha, thinking about ending my life the other day, and she's writing. He's like, no, don't, I was joking. Oh God.
Oh God. Is it just notes, or like are you writing down your groceries for later, maybe after this session?
Gonna be honest, tic-tac-toe with myself. I always win. She's the perfect human.
Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. We're also on TikTok at Gomjabar Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the Golden Path.